Great. Hi, everyone. Happy Tuesday. I know folks are still trickling into the chat, but I wanted to kick things off on time and welcome everyone to today's session, Why Dscout, How the Right Experience Research Platform Can Scale Your Entire Organization. My name's Colleen Pate. I lead customer and community marketing efforts here at Dscout, and I will be your moderator for this really exciting conversation that I'm thrilled to be having with four of our customers today, and excited to have you all here. Before we dive into all of our content and our conversation today, just wanted to make a few housekeeping notes for everybody on the call. The session is being recorded, as you may have just heard, so we will send you the recording afterwards. And feel free to sit back, absorb the conversation. You can rewatch it if you want, or share it out with the rest of your team. And we're sure to make time for Q&A at the end. So definitely use that Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom screen to send in any questions. I'll also be keeping an eye on the chat, but sometimes it's easier to get it in the Q&A. And then in that last 10 minutes, we'll save plenty of time for Christine, James, Bree, and Dana to answer questions. And then I think before we get started, I would love to know everyone in the chat. Feel free to drop in. Where are you dialing in from? Where are you joining us from today? I myself am joining from very sunny Cambridge, Massachusetts. Nice. St. Louis, California. A lot of Chicago, exciting. Well, awesome. I know I always love to see where people are joining from. I feel like there's always someone close to me in Mass, as well as we always have some global friends too. And with that, let's kind of introduce our great panel of speakers who represent a really great set of orgs that are using Dscout, including Discovery Education, Dolby, and Aya Healthcare, and have all made the move to Dscout within the last year. So I'm going to hand it over to them to introduce themselves. Let's kick it off with you, Bree, and then pass it along from there. Can you share your name, your role, where you're based, and just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Bria Bowe. I'm the Senior Manager of Research at Discovery Education. I'm coming up on 4 years here, which is kind of crazy to think about. I am based in Chicago, which has also provided me some, great experiences with Dscout, having one of their offices here. I worked with Dscout in the past at a different company, and so I've had a long-standing relationship with the organization and through both using it as a tool, but also kind of networking and as a community through the people, nerds, and whatnot. So always excited to kind of re-engage and now bring the tool to Discovery Education. We just kicked off officially this month. So I'm definitely kind of in the newbie at this company, but have that experience in the past.
Very nice. Best of both worlds. All right, let's pass it to Christine.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christine Maldonado. I'm based in Boise, Idaho, and I'm a lead UX researcher at Aya Healthcare. We are a marketplace for healthcare professionals, specifically travel healthcare professionals, and the clinics and hospitals that need extra support. I have used Dscout in previous organizations and was really pleased with a lot of the functionality, specifically the diary functionality. And so when I came to Aya Healthcare, we were building out our research team. We're now a team of 5. We were looking to do some diary work, and so that was sort of why we turned to Dscout, and we have been very happy bringing them on board.
Awesome. Dana?
Hi, I'm Dana. I am a senior UX research strategist at Dolby. I am based in San Francisco Bay Area in California. And I joined Dolby a little less than a year ago now. And I am the first research specialist on our awesome UX team. And with that comes a lot of sort of expanding the research program and capabilities across the team and beyond at Dolby. And Dscout has been a really great partner for that so far. So we're really excited going forward.
Excellent. And then James, want to round us out?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm James. I lead the UX team in the entertainment group at Dolby. And I've just been absolutely delighted to have been able to bring Dana on as she said, as our sort of first dedicated role in the UX research discipline. I am also based in the San Francisco Bay Area. I live a little bit further north, about an hour over the Golden Gate Bridge. And I lead a team of just amazing designers spread across the world, China, Barcelona, New York, and here in the Bay Area as well. And yeah, very excited to be here.
Excellent. So I think with that, we can get started. At Dscout, we really wanted to put this session together for this time of year because I know so many of us know it as like budgeting and planning season, always a thrill. But so many of us are looking at tools this time of year and thinking about, where to go next as like looking through the end of the year in 2025, and it can be really overwhelming. So we wanted to share the story of how these 4 customers brought on Dscout as a new tool to partner with in the last year, what their evaluation process was like, how they landed on Dscout. And so we'll really spend, the next like 30 minutes talking through what each of them has been looking for in their experience research platform, what set us apart from other solutions, and also maybe most importantly, any impact switching to Dscout has already had on their org. So really looking forward to this conversation. It'll be like lighter slides than you might be used to from other sessions I've run, but it'll be a really great back and forth. And again, feel free to drop any questions as we go in the Q&A box. So with that, to kick things off, I would love to hear from the 4 of you about the challenges that these teams have faced, that your teams have faced before making that switch to Dscout. I know like research teams can sometimes like struggle with tools that maybe don't scale as quickly as your org needs. Or if you have like a certain recruiting niche or need certain types of participants, it can be like a really consuming process to find those folks. So I think Bree, we're gonna kick it off with you. If you wanted to share like a little bit more about any of the kind of like challenges or pain points that you had with other tools before you were looking at Dscout to bring on at Discovery.
Yeah, for sure. So in my previous experience, I am the research manager of mostly the qualitative research. I partner with other research leaders. We have multiple verticals at Discovery Education. And so we're always looking to do mixed method, a multi-method approach. And something that as our UX practice, specifically in qualitative research, continued to grow and that maturity model scale, we needed a like true partnership rather than just a tool is what we were looking for. So we've been through a couple tools. I started as the only UX researcher on the team. When I started 4 years ago, the team has grown to 3 of us now on the UX side. And then we have additional researchers to support like customer surveys and things like that, data analysis and things like that. But it was really important for us to find that true partnership. And why that was important was that we needed it to match our maturity model that we were growing into. So we are a shared service and our business has also grown a lot in the last couple of years. So that's really put some pressure on our bandwidth, on our prioritization and things like that. And so we needed someone to help us with the strategy of how we grow our practice and optimize it. So we're not focused on some of the operations like the recruiting management and the sourcing of the participants, as well as just making sure we get that thought leader in keeping up with the best practices of research and how we can integrate that multi-method approach. And so we've used multiple tools in the past, but it always feels like there was a disconnect maybe between tools and our strategy moving forward. And because Dscout has that kind of community within the people nerds, I know I found something on the blog this summer about research maturity model actually, and I sent it to my team and I was like, I really feel like we wrote this or like we could have written this, right? So when you feel really aligned to your partner in a tool and in the community, you can feel that you're executing that on that maturity model together, and that tool will be a great partner to enable that. And so that's what we were looking for, so that things didn't feel so disparate on our kind of journey through that maturity model.
Awesome. Thanks, Bree. That's great to hear, especially about the People Nerds content really resonating. And I'm curious to switch over to Christine. Um, with Aya, what can you kind of walk us through some challenges that were like frustrating for your team before switching to Dscout?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't necessarily know if there was like frustrations terribly, but what really brought us to Dscout was as I mentioned, Aya is a platform that supports travel healthcare providers and the clinics and hospitals that need that extra support. And as you can imagine, that during COVID, that was a crazy time for the business, and that was simultaneously a time where the organization really sort of pivoted to be more like a product first company and really trying to reach our end users, which are the nurses and healthcare providers. And so as they were building up their product team and really kind of putting on like a design first like mentality, they also started investing in UX research as well. And so as we're growing this research team, now fast forward here, it's, 2023 at the time, because we started our Dscout early this year. We also obviously noticed as the, kind of, well, I guess depending on who you ask, the changing of the pandemic, like you're not seeing like, it's not at its peak any longer. And so from a research team, as we're like looking for new business opportunities, it was sort of like, well, what is a travel nurse experience now in this post-pandemic time? And given the longitudinal nature of job hunting, looking for a job, onboarding, and then knowing that a lot of these contracts are only 3 months, and then you sort of start the process over, a diary or longitudinal study was really needed to kind of understand what is this new journey for a travel nurse. And so the tool that we had previously just really wasn't going to be able to support us in that endeavor. And working with Dscout in the past, I brought it to my manager's attention, like that this is a great platform to run this particular methodology. And he's super supportive and open. And so we started talks with Dscout about bringing that on board for Aya. And interestingly, it was at that time that I like to say, like we came for the diary party, but we ended up staying for usability because we didn't even realize that, like, again, at previous organizations, I had only used the diary product, and I didn't realize that there was expansion into usability. And so we test drove usability, and we ended up actually completely sunsetting our old tool, and we are all in on Dscout currently. And so it's really great. We have a lot of flexibility now with different methodologies, depending on research questions or goals that our team has, and we really feel like we can support them in whatever asks that they have. So.
That's awesome. I love to hear. I'm definitely going to steal that quote of came for diary, stayed for usability. Always really exciting to hear when people are, figuring out ways to use different parts of the platform based on what they need or using them in conjunction. I think with that, yeah, Dana and James, I'm curious if we switch over to hearing about kind of Dolby pre-Dscout. I know your team was a little newer. Dana, you were the first hire. What was important to both of you as you were thinking about onboarding an experience research platform?
Yeah. So when I came in, I kind of looked at some of the past research the team had been doing, both to familiarize myself with, the ecosystem at Dolby, but also to kind of understand our needs and where we can grow. And I started to see some patterns in terms of us kind of like using the existing tools we had, in the most convenient way, but not necessarily the most strategic way. So I think that was a big factor in evaluating tools is there a tool that lets us really be flexible and also can accommodate, at Dolby, we have a whole portfolio of product areas and from speakers to TVs to PCs, mobile products, starting to get into the AR, VR space. it's a growing landscape. And so having a tool that lets us do something different for each area was really valuable. In addition to that, some studies had really niche populations, and really making sure we find the right people and have methods to kind of verify that they are who we're looking for, and they fall into this very niche bucket, but we can verify that and we can find that, was also kind of high up on that list of what we were looking for. James, anything you'd like to add to that?
Sure. Yeah, I think you captured that really well. I think, as a leader, I think it's very prudent to look at your toolkit and look at your strategy regularly and think through, what kind of problems are we trying to solve at this particular point in time. And so we looked at, we already had a solution, as Dana said, and it's interesting what Christine said. You came for the diary studies and stayed for the usability testing. Well, we were doing much more sort of usability testing before we came to Dscout. And I think the diary study aspect was very interesting to Dana with her experience. And that's been super important as we think about, doing more and more work in the innovation space. So at Dolby, we've really put a big focus on that in the last couple of years. We have multiple groups that are actually involved in driving that. And so the idea of generative research has become very important to us. And I think that it's been, in the short time that we've been using it so far, it's really enabled us to kind of open up those innovation teams to new ideas from the participants, and it's been, it's looking to be very promising for us.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Dana and James. And I think now that we've kind of heard about those like initial challenges, you kind of, knew that either like you didn't really have the right tool in place, or you needed something that would let you like better like mature and scale with you and your team. Would love to like walk a little bit more into the like evaluation process of, when you're thinking about a new tool, there's so much to weigh of like, what's the business case? Where does it fit with the strategy, as I think all of you mentioned, as well as, what would it look like as you're like evaluating and testing if this is right, getting buy-in from the rest of the team. I think Christine, I'd be curious to start with you actually, no, we're going to start with Bree. If you can walk us through, I know you already knew Dscout really well. How did you, this time around, evaluate it kind of against other platforms?
Yeah, good question. So, our year and kind of times of year really revolve around school years in the education sector, obviously being an ed tech company. And so this would have been in kind of like the spring timeframe. Our tools often are, around more of the year. And so we didn't have kind of any contracts coming up or anything like that. But one of our designers who's very in tune with kind of design and UX community mentioned that she ran into Dscout at, a conference, or I forget what it was, a webinar. And she kind of like brought it back to my attention. Like Dscout had been something that I had used at a previous role, but just kind of wasn't in my purview again at this role. As you can imagine, when you're lots of things on our plate. So evaluating tools, there's usually like a time box that I do that, some recency bias, what's working, what's not. So it was a little bit of an off cycle kind of, bringing it to my attention, which worked out well because it gave us some time. At first I was like, oh, we just kicked off the next contract year with our current tools. Like, let's look at it, but not thinking too heavily about it right now. It actually turned out to be a great time to look at it in that spring timeframe for us because of like the cycles of our research. So the designer kind of brought it back to our attention. We had a kickoff meeting, and I will definitely say the amount of patience that the Dscout sales team and kind of like onboarding team has shown us has been amazing, because it really allowed us to explore, to stress test some things, to socialize it with other stakeholders. Like we just met so often and had so many questions and kind of niche questions about our industry. You know, everyone thinks they're unique, and Dscout always had that kind of the supportive answer and examples to help us feel supported in that decision. So it not only allowed me to feel confident in understanding kind of how to implement it, but bring other stakeholders along for the ride. And then from there, I would say, you know, everything from the materials that the team provided us, like tool comparison charts and case studies and very specific things that we were looking for that felt like the answers to our specific questions were really helpful. And then beyond that, just the flexibility of that kind of onboarding phase. So even before, you know, your contract start date, you're meeting with the research advisors and the teams that are really going to help you enable from day one, which is huge. That goes back to that partnership rather than just a tool. They really helped me understand how day one we could start running research rather than it being, you know, the first day that we even think about how we can set things up and bring people in. And I really appreciated that, because when you have something new and you start socializing it with the team, they obviously get very excited. And something I didn't mention before was part of that maturity model is about enablement for our team. So we're trying to democratize some of the research activities a little bit more and have our designers and content specialists and things like that do more hands-on research. So there's a little bit of, there's a lot of excitement around that, but a little bit of, you know, hesitation as well, because it's a new skill set that they're exploring. And that's where the partnership from Dscout, all the way from the initial conversation to the onboarding process and enablement right now, has really felt like a really helpful part of the process.
Excellent. Yeah, I think your point about being able to, you know, bring your stakeholders along, or like bring those other teams along with you as you kind of like stress test these, are really important. James and Dana, I know over at Dolby, you you know, had a similar experience of, as you were evaluating, how could you speak a little bit to how you kind of like were able to test or like de-risk that decision of a tool for like leadership, as well as like other teams, folks like designers that I know you work with?
Yeah, that was a big crucial piece for us. I mean, you can look at, you know, a website for a tool and look at all the features and get excited, but it's another thing to, you know, really be hands-on and use it. You know, we were able to test it with a fairly complex study with a really niche audience that, you know, there isn't really language around yet. So that was really crucial to kind of test that. And myself immediately diving in, what I noticed in testing it in building out the study was that I immediately recognized it just fit the way I thought about my study and the way I thought about my process. So I think a lot of tools, you kind of have to like change your process to fit the tool. And I felt like this tool was fitting my process. And I only kind of noticed that when I had that hands-on experience. So that was really crucial. And then, yeah, I was really impressed with all of the kind of like robust participant selection features. I could really tell that Dscout invests a lot in their scouts and in their panel, and in sort of giving scouts resources on how to be a better participant. I definitely noticed that as well with the participants that were submitting their answers through our diary study. And then and then I was also able to see things like, what does it look like to share clips with outsider stakeholders? Are they actually opening them, or is it hard to get to? It's always like, while I'm the one kind of making the decision on the tool, I'm not the only one using it and accessing it. So I really wanted to make sure it was accessible to others. And then on that thread, I'm not the only one on my team kind of using it. So I really wanted to make sure our designers had a chance to also play around with it, because if I'm going to move them away from the old tool we're using, I want to make sure it fits their needs as well. And so that was really great to get their feedback, get their input. They sent me like extensive kind of like pros and cons. And for the cons, we looked at like, what can we do to, you know, work around this and still kind of get what we need from it. And that's where a lot of the cons even turned into pros, and with that flexibility aspect. So we were able to work through it. And Yeah, and I think that's really led to, as I said, our goal here is to scale our research capabilities, and we could really see ourselves doing that with Dscout.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize how pleased I've been with the team that has been working with us from Dscout. I think they've been fantastic to work with, very motivated to help us evaluate the tool, very curious about our process, the kinds of markets that we serve, really thinking about, from their perspective, trying to understand and almost kind of, is Dscout right for us? I mean, of course, there's a sales process, and of course, it's right for everybody. But making sure that we were on the right tier that made sense for us. It didn't feel like a pushback. It didn't feel like something where we were being sold an upsell that we didn't necessarily need. Although, we have those opportunities potentially going forward as we scale, as we grow. So yeah, I've just been really, really happy with that relationship part of it, as everybody else has said.
Fantastic. I know something I did want to kind of circle in on, as I know, Bree, you mentioned it, and all of you have kind of talked about our team as well as like our People Nerds community. And, the four of you have been like particularly active over the last few months as newer customers, attending some of our events, other webinars. What's it like, or how is it beneficial that you've been like part of this People Nerds community and also like have this level of like interaction and access to your peers as well as like research leaders who might be in other situations than you are? Feel free for anyone to jump in, whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, I can take or at least start us out. Yeah, the People Nerds has been really fantastic. One of the goals that we've had for our research team is to kind of build out a team site again, just to spread awareness about our discipline in our within our organization. And so kind of coming up with some content strategy of like, what should we be putting on here? What kind of blog post should we be having? And that is certainly, again, like when you think about the support that you get with Dscout from like your research advisors, from like the study part, there's like, we've also even started leaning on People Nerds and like the publications and the resources that you put out for researchers in developing our content strategy for our internal workforce. So it's sort of like this, like, I feel like Dscout really sort of checks all the boxes, not only in like helping you tactically execute your research and your research strategy, but also really helping to you to like evangelize your discipline, even within your company, or at least that's how we've been sort of using it also. I also really appreciate like the Slack community. I know if, other research Slack groups that I'm a part of, are super helpful to be able to bounce off ideas with other colleagues that, you've never really met before, but yeah, just getting multiple opinions. But it's really great that even within the Dscout now you've like segmented, the people that you're talking to, if you want to like bounce off ideas about how to, use your platform most effectively, or getting around things that maybe you've kind of come up with. And yeah, so that's what I would have to say about that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, building on that idea of evangelizing and democratizing, that can be its own full-time job, right? Like on top of actually executing the research. I know as I've gone through my kind of career so far, that's the hardest part for me, is when I was someone that was required to be the person that executed on the research and all of the kind of time and process that takes, and the person that's kind of sharing it out and onboarding people and helping them understand kind of the impact and the value of research. That was so difficult for me to be a contributor and the person that's also doing that part of it. And so I feel like, especially the People Nerd community, having kind of that experience with it throughout the years and kind of knowing it's a reliable resource, it helps augment that part of it. Like, don't just hear it from me, hear it from other industry leading professionals that have different perspectives. And so it'll take the weight off of us to constantly doing that evangelizing and allows people on our team to hear different perspectives if research like isn't their full-time job or isn't their primary role, but are slowly coming closer and closer to the practice and helping us execute it as well. It really augments that for us.
Awesome. For anyone on the call who might not be as familiar with our People Nerds blog, I will like just drop a link in the chat to our blog as well as the Slack community at the end, so you can join or check it out, read a few articles, and see what you think. And I think kind of moving towards like any kind of like benefits you've already seen or impact on your teams. I know you are like newer customers in these roles and teams you're on now. But I would kind of like love to talk about the impact that has already maybe been made since this transition. And Bree, I'm wondering if you can kind of start us off with sharing how Dscout maybe has helped like empower your team, whether it's like has it made your research like more accessible to others like throughout your organizations or across teams?
Sure. So I mean, when I say we're fresh, we're like 1 weekend technically of activation. So what I will say though, it has definitely, we've been doing as part of the onboarding and the transitioning for the team. Dscout has been really supportive in doing some lunch and learns and enablement processes with us and our team members. So I would say, even though, you know, we're just getting to launch our first study and we're hoping to do it this week, which is a lot in itself, right? We were activated on Monday and by Friday, we're gonna plan on launching our first study in Dscout. But just that excitement, and I think the team seeing that we are invested in that maturity model and helping them to become closer to the customer has really helped us a lot with kind of our partnership as a shared service. They see that, you know, there's no sense of like gatekeeping in having that relationship with our customers and getting that feedback, and we want them to have that as well. So even though we're just kicking off tactically with the tool, the investment in the tool and the partnership is already going a long way with the team, and we're all very excited to take that into the actual contract execution now.
That's awesome. Activated on Monday and launching on Friday is super exciting. Christine, I know you and the team at Aya have been onboarded for a little longer. I'm curious of, you know, any changes that you've seen since you've been able to start using Dscout, like particularly in terms of like recruiting or generating faster insights. I know, you know, you mentioned recruiting for this like little bit of more of like a niche audience and have started using some like pretty creative methods to start recruiting the right participants for what you need.
Yeah, so you know, as I've mentioned for people who joined late, we work with our end users or travel healthcare providers, so travel nurses, travel doctors, et cetera. And so as you can imagine, it's a really, I mean, just getting nurses and doctors is difficult, but then further, you know, like narrowing that down to people who travel, it's a very niche population. And so but to our surprise, there are some travel healthcare providers on Dscout. It's certainly not, you know, in full transparency, like enough to rely on just our Scout panel. And so Dscout's been really great at helping us kind of come up with, you know, showing us how we can, you know, bring our own participants. We usually intercept them from our home pages via a Pendo guide and then direct them right over to a Dscout study. And that, you know, transition, that was there some concerns, like, are people going to, like, are we going to lose them in this funnel of, you know, clicking over, or are they going to, you know, remember when they get like emails to remind them to join live sessions from Dscout as opposed to from Aya. And you know, we've had some hiccups along the way, but you know, our partners in research have been really helpful in helping us through that, working through that. And so we're finding ways to get around that. And then you know, we also have learned that, again, Dscout is really investing and kind of coming up with this like third party, like recruiting ability to help those customers, us who have like more difficult to find participants to lean on and utilize. And I guess I would say that the other thing, it's related to what I was just sort of saying, not necessarily impact, but I will say that, you know, during the the demo part where we were on our trial, I remember our account manager, he was really great. We would give feedback all the time, and you're always told like, oh, thanks, we'll take this into consideration, we'll pass this on to the product team, but you don't really know if that's actually happening, or it's sort of like, oh, thanks, but I don't really actually expect anything to change. And I will say that is something that I am like continuously surprised and delighted by Dscout, is that they like, it feels like the whole company is like researchers, like depending on like like our salespeople, like they just ask really insightful questions, and this company really does act on the things that you are giving back or providing feedback. An effective way that we've learned is like, I will often make Loom videos as to like screen share of like where I'm finding some hiccups, or just to demonstrate. And the engagement that I have back with our research advisors, and like I'll get emails back saying, hey, remember when you sent us this feedback, this is coming out in product now. So it really feels like it's a true partnership, and they're really invested in being responsive to you as a client and what your needs are to get your research done right.
Excellent. That's amazing to hear. I know, like, we always really like pride ourselves on, of course, as like a company, like originally for researchers, people who do research. Our research team spends a lot of time, learning more about what folks need as customers. So I'm so glad you've had that experience. And I know it's already
I also wanted to briefly shout out the support team at Dscout. I know some of the biggest impacts we've seen is even in having someone who can like review a test before launch has been really helpful for our team. Again, I'm only one researcher and I only have so much time in the day, so that already takes some time off my plate in terms of like if a designer on my team is launching a study and they want a gut check, they have it, and they don't have to wait on me, and I don't have to be a blocker on that. So that's awesome. Just wanted to shout that out as well, because your support team is really awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's definitely great to have them as like a second set of eyes and like a second, kind of like quasi member of the team when you need them. And I know we're almost at Q&A time, but I would love to wrap it up. You could each share maybe like one like takeaway or a piece of advice for teams that are like thinking about using Dscout, and like just what would be like your number one thing you would want someone to say or to share if you could only share one thing? And we can start with you, Dana.
Yeah, I guess the biggest one is don't be afraid to get messy with the tool. I think or experimental. Like I think that is really like what I love about research is you you have these sort of foundations of like best practices and best methods to use, and sometimes the best method is to mix and match and tweak things a little bit for your specific focus. And I think Dscout really enables that. And so I highly just recommend, trying to break from any like pre-existing patterns and really embrace that kind of creativity in the experimentation itself.
I love that.
I can jump in. Just being such a new customer, I would say if anyone else is, potentially looking into Dscout to expand kind of their research tool set or replace anything that they have, don't be afraid to, ask the hard questions of the team. I think, sometimes some of the early conversations, you feel like with any tool, it's like maybe a pony show or like, like really showcasing, but they are willing to get nitty gritty with your specific concerns or fears or matching your needs to kind of what the tool is capable of. And they'll be very honest about kind of capabilities that it can help your team with. And so I would say, just have those frank conversations, because they are a company that's built from researchers, so they understand. So you can go take it to that next level and ask those very critical questions that help you assess if the tool is right for you or not.
Yeah, and I would just say kind of like echo what Brianne said, but even after like you sign on the dotted line, I'm continuously impressed. Like we have weekly, or not, sorry, not weekly, monthly meetings with our research partners, advisors, just to kind of, what's going well, what's not going well. You feel like really like someone is supporting you in making sure that you're getting the most that you can out of this tool. And like I said, not being afraid to document or speak up when things aren't working the way that you want them to work. Because like as I mentioned, like I'm very much impressed with the turnaround or like the remedy seeking that I get, and almost like within like the day, sometimes I'll get like the response back, like, oh, this is how you fix this, or oh, you might not have seen this. Like, so you really definitely do feel supported. So be a squeaky wheel, because I think in some ways they truly do appreciate it, especially as they're building the usability line of business out. It's a really exciting time as a researcher to be a Dscout customer at this phase, because there's aspects of it that you really do feel that you are creating the world that the research world that you want to play in. So with Dscout.
I would say, I think when it comes to really taking a look at the tool set that you already have, or if you're not using a tool like Dscout, I think it's really important to do the due diligence to understand and articulate your goals. I think it doesn't help to take the approach, which I've seen before, where, hey, there's this fancy tool, what can we use it for? Versus let's really understand the kind of research, the kind of problems we want to solve, and is Dscout right for us? And I think that can be a long process. That I think that's an internal thing, and Dscout can definitely help with that. But I think, for us, that was a very important part of the process. Maybe we caused some frustration along the way, but we really wanted to make sure that this was right for us and helped us to meet our goals. So that's the one piece of advice I would give.
Excellent. All great advice. I love the be messy, be a squeaky wheel. I'm going to make a list out of these and share them out after. And I think with that brings us to our Q&A. We have about 5 minutes for Q&A. So everybody who is an attendee, please feel free to drop those either in the chat or the Q&A. I'll be monitoring both and can ask them of our speakers. And we did already have one that came in on just kind of like any tips and tricks around, when you are having to go through the procurement process of moving from like a previous vendor to a new tool. Always a fun experience.
I mean, for us, just recently going through that, I would say really, especially as a researcher, there's a lot of things that I was super excited about and passionate about, but like know your audience, right? So like there's different people you have to bring into that process, and the different audiences care about different things. And so just make sure you're very clear on kind of investment and how it's going to support your strategic outlook and long-term plan and kind of the benefits of switching. And then just being very clear and highlighting what your stakeholder group that's helping you make that decision needs to hear, because it's easy to geek out on some of the stuff that you might care about as a research executor, but it's different when you have different audiences involved in more of the like actual execution of that.
Awesome. And then another question, I wonder if this one maybe would be a good one for you, Christine. For anyone jump in though, is can you walk us through how you've structured your diary studies of like what has been a challenge or like a pleasant surprise as you've been running diary research?
Yeah, so we've just done the one study so far, the diary study, and in terms of I will say the challenge, I think in some ways it's something that I've already alluded to. It was just kind of finding the participants to participate in the study. and that's something that, we're continuously working on in terms of expanding our available pool of nurses. We joke around that some of the nurses that we have on Dscout, like I said, there's several on there, but we don't want to keep using the same people because we joke around like we're kind of, it's a one-way friendship because we see these people in our study all the time. But again, that's something that we're actively working on to remedy. I would say that the pleasant surprise was just how, I think for our stakeholders were incredibly impressed with the fact that participants stick around, like there was no attrition, and like for what, I think that there was just like this misperception, like, oh, people wouldn't stick around for a diary study of this length. And the depth of the artifacts that we received. We asked people to like whiteboard out their job journey from their perspective. And the richness, the quality of participants is just unmatched. And I will say, like, again, some of the things that have been really helpful in thinking with your research advisor, there was some really clever ways, like we would communicate like the things, the goal that we had and the, ideas that we had, the questions or the methodologies that we were going to use to get at that. And then it was really great to have like a partnership with someone outside of the box, like outside of Aya, asking us like, oh, have you ever considered asking a question in this way? So for like one of the, first things, it might seem obvious, but we were having difficulties ensuring that people who were saying that they were in fact nurses or healthcare professionals were in fact nurses or healthcare professionals. And so, again, one of our research advisors was like, if you could, what if you asked them to just cover up their identifying information and show them your hospital badge? And I was like, oh, yeah. And of course it does, it will weed out some people, but you can definitely feel certain that the folks that you're getting are in fact nurses. And that really helped to, I think, alleviate concerns with our stakeholders that the people that we were speaking to were in fact actually healthcare providers. And so, I would just say the benefits were just like the unmatched quality of participation, the richness of artifacts that we get back to tell a research story, a comprehensive research story. And then that just in turn, I think, really supports our discipline and our craft within our organization and the value that our organization has or sees in us as a team.
Yeah, if I could add on to that a little bit, I think having run some diary studies, without a dedicated tool in the past, it is so much work to recruit and then constantly remind participants to hit their diary touch points, to manage that, make sure that's happening. And that was really so smooth with the Dscout. I was really impressed. And so not only did that, I think that can often be a factor why teams kind of shy away from diary studies. It's, the effort of it can be so daunting. So to just really reduce that burden is so valuable. And then on top of that, Dscout enabled us, it's asking about like structuring. So I think structuring the diary study, what was really awesome was we intended to do like follow-up live interviews with a select number of scouts that participated in the diary study. And it was really smooth to be able to move participants from those phases of the study. And then similarly, like the screening tools and being able to have like a video in the screening is really valuable because we're going to invite these people to share their lives with us over the course of 2, maybe 3 weeks. We want to make sure it's the right person for that duration, and that's really valuable.
Definitely. One question was more of like a tactical question of, I think most of you switched from a previous vendor. How do you actually go about, like now that you wanted to go to Dscout, how do you go about like breaking up with your previous vendor? If you have any like tips and tricks for someone who like wants to do that and has never done that before.
While I can't really speak, I didn't do the breaking up. So I was really lucky. I just had to sit back. But I will say that one thing that we ran into, and definitely just a good lesson learned is that, in our fine print, we were told that we would have 6 months of access to our data following the official breakup. And while that was, we quickly found out that that wasn't actually true. And they allowed us to have, for example, our videos, but they didn't like allow us to have the summary data afterwards. And so we had to go back and forth with our legal departments because they were not willing for a while. And you know, and essentially, so I guess what I would say is when you're confirming that breakup, to, you know, make sure that you understand, you know, the terms of what you're going to have access to. And no matter if you know what the terms are, start that download or backing up, or if you know you're going to be transitioning out some data, start it early, or maybe even build it into your process, you know, as an ongoing, you know, part of your workflow, so that if and ever that happened, you know, like it's not hard to, you know, pull your parachute cord. I don't know.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Dana will attest to the fact that we assembled a team to get all of our content down from our previous provider, and that was not easy. So I think familiarizing yourself with that and maybe getting ahead of the game, you know, if you're really thinking about this transition and you feel like you have enough information to sort of say, well, this is definitely a path we want to take, get ahead of it. That's our lesson learned, I think, very similar.
Yeah, definitely recommend getting snacks for your team if you do end up doing, you know, spending a day as a group just downloading content.
Awesome. I'm picturing that as like the breakup Avengers trying to get all the data they can. Well, I know we went a little bit long, but I did want to say thank you so much to everyone for joining, and a huge thank you, of course, to, you know, Bree, Dana, Christine, and James for, you know, sharing your insights and your experiences with us today. Everybody who dialed in, you'll get a recording of this session in your inbox later this afternoon. And I will also just quickly drop a link to the People Nerd Slack chat if you would like to join our Slack community. That'll also be in the follow-up email, as well as a link to our People Nerds blog, where you can, you know, dive into some of the content that I know Bree and some of our other speakers already talked about. So thank you so much for joining, and I hope everyone has just an excellent rest of their Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Philip. Bye, everyone.